Sitam Sitam Swaha Haidakhandi Shri Sutram Sarvasuprayakam Asya Sarvamatrena Sarvadavashavartini Swaha Aham Yoganam Shaktir Haidakhandi Parmeshti Vidya Sarvesh Prashnonita Swaha Haidakhandi Shri Durga Yogi Gamya Sudalva Charana Siddhivat Tapasa Sulvavat Swaha Aham Shakti Praloke Sarvos Pradani Ashuto Sharma Vidya Parmeshti Gloria Swaha Asita Siuretam Kwatyatvaye Purvakam Swanti Namakritti Sam Sarvadapada Swaha Haidakhandi Shri Sutram Sarvasuprayakam Asya Sarvamatrena Sarvadavashavartini Swaha Aham Yoganam Shaktir Haidakhandi Parmeshti Vidya Sarvesh Prashnonita Swaha Haidakhandi Shri Durga Yogi Gamya Sudalva Charana Siddhivat Tapasa Sulvavat Swaha Aham Shakti Praloke Sarvos Pradani Ashuto Sharma Vidya Parmeshti Gloria Swaha.
Over the last 50 years, many persons have been referred to as gurus in their field of expertise. Such references trivialize the meaning of this word and diminish our reverence for such beings. A guru is not just an expert in some field of endeavor. A guru is the materialization of infinity on earth. He is divinity incarnate, a being far beyond the realm of specialized learning. Even more so, these rare persons may present at different levels of being as a jnani, a yogi, a siddhi, or an avatar. And they may choose to live among us without our knowledge unless they choose to reveal themselves. What then do we make of the term Mahavatar, the great guru, the one who gives blessing and instruction to other gurus, the guru's guru? These have a profound effect upon their time and their civilization. Mahavatars may choose to cast no shadow, leave no footprint, live on light, raise the dead, and physically materialize their body at will. How are we to begin to understand such a being? Even the very idea of a Mahavatar is foreign to our Western culture. In the Eastern perspective, a Mahavatar is a manifestation of God Himself, who has taken a vow to always manifest a physical body on earth in order to help humanity. Consider, for a moment, all that this statement implies. A Mahavatar, called Baba Ji, did appear among us very recently in northern India. His appearance was visually documented during the last full year of his latest incarnation in 1983. The book, Baba Ji Mahavatar, The Descent of Eternity into Time, shows how he changed from a young, reclusive yogi to the figure of a simple father, which his name, Baba Ji, implied. He was all of that and so much more during his brief 14 years of serving mankind.
Babaji is such a great Mahavatar. He can come and appear any moment he wants. Like he just came. He was seen, his former incarnation, left as he walked in the ribbon, it became light, and as a ball of light it left the village that has seen in 22. He came back, seen already just before the 70s, appearing as a light form in the mountains. The villages there in this area. He even helped another sick sadhu who was living, doing his penance there in the same area. Story that Babaji was helping him for some months to help his sadhu. And then again disappeared. Until he stayed on the mountain for more than 40 days, not eating, not sleeping, just in meditation, in samadhi, sitting on the mountain. And slowly the villagers came to him, but then his former state, he didn't disappear anymore. And he went to the cave, and stayed in the cave, and then the whole story started, and people started to come to him. And they made, the school teacher started to make his first picture, which is not available. Which was like still in the transcendental status, like half light, half body.
This was part of the Mahavatar. This was maybe a year already.
He didn't speak, he didn't eat, he was just a very divine being, yogi, very pure incarnation of the divine, who said he's not born from womb, he just can appear and disappear when he wants. But his play was that he slowly went to mirror what was coming in front of him. After he took his moon down, he started to make a connection with worldly, like a flower and children. And he started to speak a few words, and then many Indian saints came and sinners, and everything came to his feet. And only the last 5 years, like many Westerners, quite some Westerners started to come. And then you see also this, he started to just mirror. He didn't stay in this very yogic state, he went completely down and started to mirror what was going on in our consciousness. That was in one way, of course, the beauty and the gift that we could feel the divinity of Babaji while we were being with him, in all our nakedness, because he knew everything that was going on in the deepest corner of your heart or mind. He just knew everything. After spending a moment with him, you knew that he knew, you were completely there. He knew every single thought, feeling, funniness, hypocrisy in your own system. He just knew everything that was going on, so you felt very exposed. And this was the intensity of the process of being with Babaji. You were so exposed that you knew there was no corner you could hide. His mind you could throw it away, because Babaji knew everything. There was just exposure in his presence. That's I don't know why I'm getting here, but it was a very important experience of being with the physical incarnation so great. And that's why you see at the end, you see some pictures that Babaji just sitting with sunglasses, and he becomes like a very, I don't know, almost Western person. Just even something like walking with a transistor radio and sunglasses to the river and say, "Hey, you mister!" And it's like impossible to say how he came. But he said, "I am nobody and nothing." But he went so far that he just mirrored us. Whatever would come in front of him, he would be that mirror. And then he also died like in a very human way. He took samadhi, like his heart stopped. He said, "I have like 1,000 knives in my heart." And he stopped to be. He just went in a very, like it looked like a normal death. His heart stopped and he was gone. And then created a samadhi place for him in the ashram. But it looked like a very normal death, not a very great, like yogic exposure or special blessings or happenings. Though there were many signs and many miraculous things happening, and also when he went, it was like the world stopped in this area. Like whole life stopped. All very special experiences. But at the same time, it looked so simple and so natural. He was peeling potatoes and just sit with you, and but you were never safe. You were never. This exposure was so intense.
It always knew everything.
Haidakhan Baba incarnated into human form as a young adult and first began to give darshan, or blessing, to his followers in about 1970. He soon attracted a following and also began to call upon his disciples from previous lifetimes. In the Fire of Transformation, one of Babaji's foremost disciples, Gora Devi, writes of her early life at Haidakhan Ashram in December of 1973.
Other than Tara Devi, I am the only Western person living here, but Babaji has now told us that one day he will call many people to this remote place from all over the world, and that he will construct many buildings here at Haidakhan. At the moment, the prospect of that ever occurring seems quite unreal.
But the ashram was built, and the disciples were called. And those we might refer to as devotees, who often learned of the relationship to Baba in previous lifetimes, were called to him in ways that were unusual, surprising, and often ineluctable. The urgency was immediate, and the logistics of getting there seemed to work out with magical ease. When he called, you came.
For me, there's only before Babaji and after Babaji in my life. So I was living with Leonard Orr, the founder of Rebirthing, and this was in San Francisco. And I was opening the mail. There was a very mysterious letter from India, and there was no return address, and it just said Leonard Orr, 301 Line Street. And I opened it up, and it just said, well, first of all, the paper was very strange. It was a very strange paper. It wasn't like any paper I'd ever seen. And there was a child's writing, printing in pencil, and it said, "Come to India." And there was no signature. So I showed it to Leonard, and I said, "We better go." And that was the beginning. And we knew we had been called, but we had no idea who had called us. So on our first trip, 12 of us rebirthers went, and we just all decided to split up and go to different parts of India and look for a teacher. The way I met Babaji himself is that Leonard decided he wanted to go alone, so he said, "You get your head team together and you meet me in 3 days." So Leonard took off, and he said, "When you come, look for this guy named Muniraj." And that's right here is Muniraj. And that's all the information that I had. And after 3 days, my mind was like glue. I didn't know what to do, whether I should stay with this one guru I had met or I should go with Leonard. And so finally at midnight, I just started freaking out, and I screamed, "God, I demand to know my true spiritual path, and I demand to know tonight," I said. And I was yelling at the universe. And then I heard the arti that night, and I said, "This is it." You know, I didn't see Babaji in my dream, but I heard the arti. So I went down and I got on a bus. And I got to this village called Haldwani, and I thought it was going to be a little mountain village, and I thought, well, I'll just ask a few people who Muniraj is. But it was a bustling city, and I didn't have any directions. This was my first test from Babaji. So I was going up the river, I had my backpack, and I was trying to cross this river, and I kept falling in the water, and I was like, I didn't know what was going on. And it took a couple hours, and I finally got there, and I saw these 108 steps, and I just thought, oh my God, I ran up. I had so much energy. I ran up these 108 steps, and I didn't know what I was looking for, because we had no pictures of Babaji in those days. So I had no idea what he looked like. And I was expecting, a guru with, satin robes and a turban, really fancy. So I ran up the steps, and then somebody grabbed my dress, and they said, "Hey, you're supposed to pranam to the guru. You're supposed to bow to the guru." I said, "Well, where is he?" And I had walked right by him because I couldn't believe it was him. He was dressed like a farmer. He had straw hanging out of his mouth. And, I was raised on a farm. So he was actually dressed like that for me to greet me as a child, just to put me right back to my childhood.
I don't ever remember a time that Babaji wasn't in my life. When I was a child, he appeared to me a lot, and I had dreams about him all the time. Didn't know his name was Babaji. And he was always with me, but I haven't always been with him all my life. I'm still working on that. In 1976, I was working in my orchard, and I felt someone staring at me, presence. And I turned around, and Babaji was there. And he looked at me with that eye-piercing gaze of his and said, "You come." And then he disappeared and reappeared in the form that we all know Babaji in, and then flashed back and forth the old Haidakhan Baba form and the new. our Baba form, and was gone. When I was a child, he always appeared to me in the older form. So he didn't say where to come and when to come or how to come. He just said, "You come." And I went in to the house that night and was reading through a magazine, which I didn't do a whole lot, but I did that night, and I found a small little advertisement in the very back of this magazine saying that the Kumbh Mela was happening in India that year. And as soon as I read that, I knew that that's where I should go. I had read the autobiography of a yogi, and probably if I could have chosen any person in history to meet, it would have been Babaji. So a few weeks later, I was on my way to India with a stop in Hawaii to wait for visas.
There was one of these three-way light bulbs that you turn, it goes brighter and brighter and brighter. And I turned it off, and I got my sleeping bag, and then all of a sudden the light was just flashing on and off in the room like this. And then all these lights kept swirling around the room, and then it just like materialized, and I saw Babaji. I would say as, not as clearly as like I'm looking at you, but I'd say 2/3 or 3/4 as clear as I'm seeing you. I went, oh my God, I was totally shocked.
So this was fall of '78 that this was happening. We were at home meditating one morning, and I don't remember if it was a simulcast or what, but we had virtually identical experiences, and that is meditating, and then it was like a bright white light came in the third eye, and it was like what happens with a slide and a slide projector that gets too hot and it just kind of, and then suddenly it was white light, and then the white light dissipated, and there was Baba. He was sitting on the Gautami Ganga. He was sitting there, and he says, "Time to come home, time to come to Mother India."
Before that happened also, I had gone to visit my mother in Seattle, and I have asthma, and she had 23 cats in the house, and I ended up in the hospital. I was very, very sick, and had to have oxygen when I was flying back to Denver. And they only let me on the plane if I agreed that I would go from the airport to the hospital. And as soon as David picked me up, I said, "Take me home." And I had to be propped up in bed because I couldn't breathe. And during the night, I couldn't sleep because I was on so much medication. And during the night, Baba walked into the room, very brusquely walked into the room, and came over and started pushing on my chest. And he was pushing all the air out of me, and I thought, he's suffocating me, I'm going to die. And then I thought, well, what a way to die. So I just gave into it. And then I had a big inhalation, and my asthma was gone. And when David got up, I was cleaning the house and said, "We're going to India." And so
I was coming across the bridge, and all of a sudden we're in the middle of the bridge, and I see this ball of light coming out from nowhere, just with this big ball of like gold light, and it starts coming, and it's coming, it's coming, it's getting bigger, and then there's this form of Babaji that is this big, it gets right in my face like this, same kind of experience that you're telling, this transcendental form, and it's his whole little body, and then he gives me 2 messages in about 3 words, and then he comes back out, and then he goes off into a ball of light again. And from then on, everything was different in my life.
In 1973, I had an extraordinary experience with the Jesus prayer. It's a very ancient monastic prayer that has been said by Christian monastics since the 1st century. And I always say that if I had been interviewed by a mental hospital, I would have been institutionalized after that experience. In deep despair, I was at the Seattle Library trying to find out some point of reference about what had happened to me, and I was leaving the library, walking up the street the library is on in Seattle, and Babaji came walking between two cars, dressed in a turban, three-piece suit, carrying a briefcase. And he was the most extraordinary being I'd ever seen in my life. His presence was just, it's like a sunrise right in front of your face. And as I passed him, I had this thought, well, not yet. And then I kind of collected myself and turned around and tried to follow this guy, and he'd gone, disappeared. That was in 1973. 6 years later, in 1979, I went to Haidakhan, and watching Babaji walk around the mandir at Haidakhan, it clicked with me that this was the same guy I'd seen in Seattle.
If they were alert, the people who arrived at Haidakhan would experience a constant flow of intriguing, mystifying events that often happen in and around Babaji's presence. Radhe Shyam writes,
The young 15-year-old devotee, Motu Banerjee, was walking behind Babaji while crossing the sandy area of the riverbed at Haidakhan. She became intrigued with the footprints in the sand, and suddenly she realized that Babaji was leaving no footprints as he walked through the sand.
Such uncommon experiences would stretch out everyone's sense of reality and leave them begging the question, what is really happening here?
There's a whole group of stories about Babaji and the Matrix. In the early days, there was a lot of cement being transported up to Haidakhan to do the initial building of walls and buildings. And people at night would try to count the number of cement bags that had been brought in. And they could never get a count. And if they got a count, they would go back and recount, and it would always change for them. And around that same time, Babaji took people up to Kailash, and on the way back down, they passed through a village that wasn't there. Once I drove up to Haidakhan on a truck full of people who were singing bhajans and Haidakhan songs, and we were all excited that we were going to go for darshan that night. And I got off the truck at the bottom of the steps, and I said, "Come on!" And they said, "No, we'll just take the truck up and come up the back way." I never saw him again.
Yeah. You need to know Haidakhan's far away from any other town.
There's nothing there. They couldn't have gotten on the bus. I mean, there was nothing there. They never came and they never went.
And so then we have that evening, sit in the garden with Baba for darshan, one thing and another, we're all singing to him. And, amazing things would happen. You'd be sitting there watching Baba, and there'd be like this swirl of energy, and then all of a sudden you could see through him, and you could see a hummingbird feeding on a flower, or something like that. You go, well, that's a good one. And then you'd be back, you couldn't see through him again, but he was amorphous that way. There were many times when he would touch me, and I go, it's going to just go right through me. No, didn't do it that time.
The web of magic that was woven into our lives around Baba was incredible. And one time Sita Rami and I and some others were in Allahabad for the Adi Kumbh Mela, incredibly huge festival. And Sita Rami was our it's kind of the standard of devotion. And we went around the Mela grounds and she literally stripped all the clothes off her back to give to people. But we had a small encampment, and Baba had decided not to come, but to preserve our encampment and to live out the Haidakhan discipline, we needed a Haidakhand. And we were grousing about, well, should we do this, and how can we do it here? And then we simply said, well, we'll just get started here. And we started building this Haidakhand, and all of a sudden, into the compound comes this Indian man, and he has all the right equipment to build our Haidakhand. And so he promptly digs it out, and we're looking around, but it doesn't have any bricks. And so he has this donkey with him laden with bricks. Lines it all with bricks, and we say, well, can we pay you or something? And he just leaves, just disappears out of the compound, and we're left with this, beautiful little Haidakhand to do Haidakhand with. It was such a strange thing that he just appeared for us. Should we do this? Should we do? Oh, we have to do it. We can't do it. And all of a sudden, this guy packs in all the equipment, unannounced, uncalled for, just shows up.
That was Babaji?
Well, it could have been. That was always the issue. It's like kind of a little shell game. Who's Baba? Where's Baba?
The second day which I arrived in Haidakhan, I arrived with my family and a guitar, which I never leave. Wherever I go, I bring a 12 string with me. And the second day was in Haidakhan. The atmosphere was a little strange for me, because about India and God I was not so familiar. So he looked at the box with guitars, and he said, what is inside? So I opened and I offered him the 12-string guitar. And he saw the guitars, and he blew the guitar like this. And then he put the guitar on between his legs, and he started to act like a rock guitarist playing on stage. The hair. shaking his head, and bhajan going on. And he was just not playing guitar, he was just doing like this. And the harmony, I was shocked, because the first things I never knows that Indian guru or Indian god or whatever we call it, he played what we do on the stage when the act is hot, So we started to look at each other, and I was totally astonished. And also the play, every night he played the 12 string in a way empty string, just open string, no finger, and the harmony was exactly matching the tune of the singing, and everybody tried to ask me what he's playing, he's not playing. I said, I don't know, because it's something amazing, and the act he was playing remained so strong in me, because he was acting as I play on stage when rock was going on, and it was really amazing.
The matrix that Babaji made was so fluid and so wonderfully mysterious and mind-blowing. One time, a group of people were on a bus coming back down from, I think, Elmora, and Babaji was in the lead bus, and the second bus saw Babaji on the road, waiting to driven by.
After I had been to Haidakhan and come back, and Babaji left his body, and the first time Muni Raj Shastriji came to America, he came to our farm up in Monroe, Washington, and there were a lot of people gathered there at that time, and we built a We had a very little temple, and built a fire pit, and we had, how many people were there? 50, 100 people, something like that. And like on the second day or the third day, I've been really busy getting everything going and keeping the whole thing organized somewhat. I'm out in the backyards, out in the back by the pond, and this old fellow walks in from the backwoods, and he's very old. He's dressed just like a fisherman. He's got all this fishing gear and stuff. I go, what? Where'd you come from? He says, oh, back. I was going to be fishing, he said. And he looks around and he smiles at everything and he slowly walks through. And he says, how do I leave? And I said, well, where did you come from? He said, well, I was out back there and I need to leave now. And I said, well, you have to go through the entire place and the road's out the other end. And he says, well, thank you very much. And he's got his rubber boots on, he's got his fishing pole, and all of this, and he goes through very slowly, and everybody looks at this guy. He's at least 80, 90 years old. I mean, this is an old guy. And he goes down the driveway, and he's gone. And Kay says, who was that? I said, I don't know. He came from the back. And there's no way to get on our property from the back. It's all wilderness. And they said, that was Babaji. Because we were gathered there.
Another time, very close to Babaji's samadhi, we were all down in the garden after morning arti, and the builder, remember Builder Saab's name? Tall guy. He had been living in Haidakhan for probably 10 months, organizing some of the building, and he came in. He was all dressed and shaved and ready for morning darshan. Very unusual to see him so kind of cleaned up. So he came and made his pranams, and Babaji spent some time with him. And he left. And 10 minutes later, he came back, unshaved, in his work clothes.
When Babaji first appeared to people in the local area, he was seen by most as a young teenager. But to Natin Baba, a well-known local saint who was revered by many in the Kuan region, Babaji was seen as a very, very old man. Natin Baba said, "You think he is a child? He is the oldest man in creation." The simple fact was that Baba always knew and would intercept all of our misguided thoughts and behaviors. Of his experiences in 1975, Vijay Bhattiani relates,
I felt constantly observed from both within and without. This led to a total transformation of my existence. On one day, I had been backbiting about a Babaji devotee to someone who had never met Babaji. That very same evening, Babaji called me and told me to avoid talking negative about anyone. I was stunned at his knowledge of my misdemeanor.
Regarding another occasion at the ashram, he wrote,
As I walked with Babaji along with a new foreign woman devotee, I wondered, how have all these foreigners reached here? The next instant, Babaji turned to me and told me to directly ask her how she had reached here.
there was a time very soon after I first went to India. We were down in Bombay. Babaji had a huge crowd in front of him. And there were two women from Canada and myself and somebody else. And we started sharing with each other that Babaji was in our heads. That somehow he knew exactly what we were thinking. And it dawned on us that he was doing that to the whole crowd. And it was like, wow, how does that happen? How does a being plug into all of these people at one time and begin processing their case with them? The first time I saw Babaji, he was climbing out of a cab, picking his nose. I, as a Westerner, taught never to pick my nose in public. Never to do anything rude like that. He plugged me into my politeness stuff. It was just like so quick. And he was relentless. He was totally relentless. He never, ever let up.
He was always on. Imagine that. He was always on. Even when he was sleeping, he was on. I can remember going to Delhi one time, and I needed to do something about a visa or renew a plane ticket or something like that. And I was making my way through Delhi, and I happened to be on a street corner, and this incredible, drop-dead, gorgeous Indian goddess just floated by, and I just kind of went, wow. No big deal. I got over it. A couple of days later, I arrived back in Haidakhan, climbed up the stairs. Babaji was sitting on this bench that was up there. Pretty lady. The favorite phrase that I have to use is that living with Babaji was like living with an X-ray machine that could talk. And I truly mean that. And it was probably the most frightening thing I have ever known in my entire life.
For me, that experience of understanding and realizing day after day that Babaji knew everything that was in my heart was both, like you said, extremely frightening and unnerving. But on the other hand, it was extremely freeing because I knew I didn't have to hide I couldn't hide. You couldn't hide anything anywhere. And so it was a very freeing experience and a very special experience because I could just be who I was and not hide. An experience I had, and I don't know, Loki might have even been in the office at that time because we were both working in the office. This was, I think, 1981, one of my first trips to be with Babaji in India. And we were, as usual, busy, and my desk was full of papers, and many of our desks were full of papers. And all of a sudden, we heard somebody say, Babaji's coming, Babaji's coming. And of course, Babaji's walking up the stairs. And so we quickly, oh no, and so we're grabbing all the papers and stuffing them in a file cabinet, close the file cabinet, and everything looks real neat. We're just sitting there. And there's many file cabinets and many drawers, and Babaji walks right over to the one drawer, opens it, he says, I know, like.
So one evening I was playing bhajan or Aarti ceremony in the evening time, and Babaji was sitting on his throne giving darshan. And during that playing, Babaji had one mala tied around his head and one feather. And while I was playing, many times with closed eyes, but then when I looked up, I saw this beautiful form, and I thought, oh, he looks like an American Indian, like the tribe leader from all these American Indian traditions.
And on that moment he take this mala and throw it in my lap. And while I was playing art, so I had to go on. It's so beautiful, you know, he knows everything. He's really like the father of all tradition. He's really God incarnated. While I was playing, this was like some feeling I get inside. And on that moment, he take an apple and throw it. And then I was like too overwhelmed for the communication you can have with Babaji on that level. And many times he didn't speak much, but on those special occasions when you had some strong, I don't know, realization, then he would be there to confirm whatever you were going through. And this was not happening with me. There were maybe 100 people in the kirtan hall, and they would all have those kinds of experiences at the same time. And that's of course the miracle how Babaji, he just knew everything. Like I told you, he knew everything. From past, present, from all my deeds. I remember in one woman's account from I think a Canadian woman who was telling from that when she was young, a child from 12 years old, that she was doing some praying because she had difficulty in her family, and when she came to Babaji, Babaji reminded her, remember when you prayed to me about this and that?
I think as we're struggling to remember something to say, one thing that I've certainly encountered in my life, and certainly I'm feeling very profoundly in the moment, is that about 99.9% of what Babaji said or did with me and to me, I didn't get at all. And I thought I was really hot stuff. Now you just figure, Locke was talking about enormity of ego. So you take 1/10 of a percentage point of what you might have gotten, and the swelled head, you could get over 1/10 of a percent. Just imagine where you could be at if you even got 10%. He seemed to continually set people up and do those things which got right into where the person was at. Now, supposedly this is from a being who couldn't read or write, but he knew everything about everything. He didn't need to read or write. And he was so phenomenally, remarkably consistent in his work with everyone that he would maybe have, as Luke was talking before about processing a crowd of people and what was in their minds, especially in the ashram where there was more ability, I guess, to do this. He had everybody there involved in a full-time drama that was showing them exactly where they were at. And he would have a couple hundred of these balls that he was juggling all at the same time. Meanwhile, he's sitting there talking to a villager about how his diarrhea is going. As if that's the only thing he's doing. Meanwhile, over across the river, you hear somebody flipping out, and somebody over there is laughing hysterically, and somebody over here is knitting very quietly, and somebody over there is cleaning out the toilet. And all of these balls he had going all the time. I can remember having numerous encounters where all of a sudden my stuff was up and I was literally gagging and choking on it. Babaji had assigned Malti and I to decorate the ashram one time. And one afternoon, during a satsang that was a darshan that was being held in the temple, he was sitting there, and all of a sudden, without warning, he called Malti on the carpet. And just started tearing her apart And Malti was just kind of standing there, turning a whiter shade of pale, and, you know, getting whiter and whiter and whiter. And then all of a sudden I had the thought, let's see, I was working with Malti when he's done with her, you know? And then the next thought was, okay, right, and I'm having this paranoid feeling, and if I don't get over it, he's gonna get it, and I'm really gonna get it. So I said, okay, I give it 5 seconds. If the paranoia doesn't pass, I'm out of here. Well, 5 seconds passed, and I was getting really paranoid. So I started backpedaling like this. And the original temple in Haidakhan is very small. You can't really even stand up very well in it, and can barely move around in it. And I just kind of backpedaled around the temple, out of sight of Babaji, turned, and made a beeline for the stairs up out of there. I got halfway up the stairs. I just froze like this. And I went, oh no, here we go. So, turn down the stairs, walk up the aisle between the people, and he's sitting there like this. And in that particular moment, I was able to go pranam, look him right in the eyes, and in my mind say, you got me, and I know it, and I know why. Can we kind of move on? and very, very slowly, very respectfully, I tried to smile. Like, this isn't bothering me, I'm over it. And it very slowly came. And his grimace, which could be really pretty scary, very slowly turned into a Cheshire Cat grin. Okay, mister. Out of there.
People gave Babaji many gifts, and sometimes they give him a whole stack of saris. And so he went into his room, and he got a sari, and he danced out and gave it to Motu, who was sitting next to me, and then he danced back in his room and gave one to Musirada and to Neelam and to all the women that were there, all 4 or 5 except me. And of course also I had never received a sari yet from Babaji either, and so I was just wanting to get one. But what came up for me even more so was this feeling of inadequacy. I wasn't good enough. These other women were much better devotees than I was, and that's why they got the saris, and I wasn't such a good devotee. I hadn't been there long enough. I wasn't, who knows? I just went through the whole repertoire of why I wasn't good enough. And so I went up to my room to take my nap, and as I took off the sari I had on, and I was in my petticoat and blouse to take my nap, just tucking into bed, and all of a sudden there's a rap on my door. And then I hear a bunch of commotion outside, and people say, it's Babaji, it's Babaji. And Babaji didn't come up to the women's rooms generally, particularly when we're napping. And it was not appropriate to go to the door in my petticoat, so I'm wrapping this sari around me and running to the door as quickly as I can. And Babaji is there, and when I open the door, he just smiled at me and handed me this gold silver brocade sari. And the rest of the saris were cotton that he gave away.
Don't waste too much on the setup.
Babaji is also the master of, like we were talking last night and today, knowing everything that went on in the mind. And as soon as I would get it, or any devotee would get it, there was some acknowledgement. Maybe a piece of candy you were saying last night, or maybe a wink or a little smile. In this case, it was a gold silk brocade sari.
No matter what was going on at the ashram, whether we noticed or not, Babaji's leelas were happening all the time, day and night. Radhe Shyam describes an unusual encounter from June of 1970 in his biography of Babaji.
Two persons met Babaji in the village. Together, they talked to him for a few minutes and then walked on. Later, telling someone else about their meeting with Babaji, describing him to someone, they discovered that one man had seen Babaji as an old man with a long white beard. The other had seen him as a young man with no facial hair at all.
Another experience was more objectively confirmed through the lens of a camera.
An Italian devotee took 4 pictures, separately, of Babaji standing with 4 different men, ranging in height from 5'8" to 6 feet. In each photo, Babaji appears to be the same height as the person he stood with.
Babaji once said, "You can't dream about me. Only it is I who come to you in your dream."
Soon after I heard about Babaji and was on my way to Haidakhan, I wrote a letter asking for permission, which was kind of required. And I was working in a building in Seattle, and I still have such a clear memory of going down to the lobby, dropping my letter in the mailbox. And the next morning, waking up, I had a vision of Baba dancing in the cosmos. It was the most extraordinary, joyful, accepting kind of dream I have ever had. And so I took that as a reply to my letter, quicker than airmail. And then when I got to India, I went on a trip down to Bombay from Delhi with Baba. And the first night in the sleeping compartment, he came to me in a dream, and one of the things that he would do in a dream is he'd get right into your face. And he asked me what I wanted, what I was doing there. And it was the harsh part of Baba. He wasn't. His face was very, very severe, and I was pretty scared actually. And I kind of ripped off an answer, and next morning I thought it was a pretty good answer. And so he stopped appearing in my dreams. Then he started again when we were back at Haidakhan for Navaratri, and it was a rainy night, and I had never experienced wet, smelly people singing kirtan at 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it really shreds your sense of not only dignity and well-being, but just tolerance. I storm out of the kirtan hall, fall in the rain on my butt. Just really, really wondering what I'm doing in this strange place with this teacher. That night I have a dream, and I say, "Get out of my dream! Get out of my dream!" And he did. The next morning, I appear in the darshan line, and he looks around and says, "You out! Get out!" I packed my bags. He sent somebody to my room with me to pack my bags. And that happened time and again, I have to say. I was probably sent away from Haidakhan as much as anybody.
The matrix that he wove or unwove was really something I don't understand at all. At all. All I know is that you never knew what was going to happen next, from second to second. And, you know, 1 minute everything was really cool and really, and then the next second, like that. And the only handle I could get on it was okay to be blissed, it was okay to be working on stuff. And by the way, he called Haidakhan the Bole Baba Psychological Hospital. And really, folks, if you think, you know, it was a picnic in a rose garden, forget it. It was hell. It was really hell. It was hard. It was very tough because he knew exactly where you were at, and he did things to you that would bring it right up, and you had to deal with it. And Radhasham coined the phrase, grow or go. Quickly. Get it or leave. And that's really where it was at. So it was both. And the only handle that I could get on being with all of it and what he was doing, at least with me personally, was it was okay to be blissed out, and it was okay to be working on the stuff. But as soon as you lost your sense of immediate awareness and alertness, it was fine to have a sense of humor. It was fine to laugh. But if it took you to the point of going unconscious, you got the axe. Also on the other extreme, if you got so buried in your stuff that you couldn't be in the moment also, you got the axe. In the midst of trying to hold on to that very tenuous little thread of inner balance was the most bizarre psychedelic movie you could ever, I mean, Fellini, not even close. Not even close.
Then I started getting very, very sick, and I started vomiting. And I was vomiting and vomiting until I reached a state where I was just not really in my mind, so you have to tell that part because I don't remember.
I finally gathered my courage and I went over and I pranamed and I said, Baba, Kunturi, very sick. Kunturi is the name I gave her, which is one who will receive great happiness. He says, I said, Kunturi is very sick. He's painting one of his lovely watercolors. And he looks up and he says, oh, this very good. And I said, I don't think you understand. She's sick as a dog. She's really sick. And he goes, when the Baba sounds, and this woman stands up, she says, come with me. I have the medicine that Baba made 2 days ago for her. And I said, he made the medicine 2 days ago? Yes. So I have to go with this woman, and I thanked him. And it's this red vial of stuff, 3 drops in a large glass. And I walk into the room, and she's she's still contracted. Drinks this whole glass of water. The dry heaves stop. Everything stops.
And then up came this necrotic-looking thing. It looked kind of like black liver. And it came up through my throat. I thought I was going to choke to death. And it came up through my throat and plop into the bucket. And we both looked at it, and it looked evil. And I knew that had I not come and had that taken out, that it would have killed me. And I came later to understand it was my anger. So I went down to the water and waded out with my sari on. And I got out there and I suddenly realized that I had been exorcised and that there I was having anger come back up again, and I was in conflict. And I realized that this was, suddenly I really fully, profoundly realized that I was standing in sacred water, on sacred ground, the entire place was sacred, and that I could not remain in this sacred place and have angry thoughts. And that I either had to give it all up or leave. And I really, truly stood there for, 5 or 10 minutes, and in this conflict about, well, I deserve my anger, well, I have a right to be angry, well, I was going through all my justification for my anger, and until I just got sick of it, and suddenly I thought, forget this. And I just let go and dropped down into the water. When I came up, it was a rebirth. It was like baptism, and I was reborn. And I looked up, and Babaji was sitting at the temple laughing. And he said, come up. So I got dried off, and I went up to the temple, and I pranamed. And this time, for the first time in my life, with absolute devotion and surrender. And I was in a sari with a bald head, and I thought that to serve him, to thank him, that I would be like that the rest of my life. If he wanted me to stay at the temple, I would have stayed. And so I said, Baba, how can I serve you? And he said, go home and be happy.
Talk about the participants not knowing the joke. I had this title that Babaji continually called me by, which was Chief Justice. and my ego is as good as anybody else's, so I kind of, it was a good thing, Mr. Chief Justice. And then finally it dawned on me that what he was doing to me was telling me how judgmental I was as a person. And I certainly achieved the status of being more judgmental than most people. But he would come out of his mandir at night. On the way to Arti, we would greet him. And he would kind of reach up and tickle my chin and say, Mr. Chief Justice. We had a lot of fun with this.
It was just marvelous to see the processes that Babaji would go through with the children, and they wouldn't last very long. So whatever it was that he had to exaggerate that the children had wouldn't last more than a week or two, and everything would be mellow between Babaji and the child. There was one story that a friend of mine told about a 3.5-year-old. Maybe a few of you have seen the videotape of the ashram, and there's fairly steep 108 steps going down from the ashram to the side of the river. And Babaji got this game going with this young kid of acknowledging him from afar and giving him the hand signal, and then the child would puff and climb its way up these pretty steep stairs, which were pretty big for him. And Babaji, when he reached the top, would give him a flash of love and a candy. And this would happen maybe 4 or 6 times in a row. And then suddenly, after all of that effort, there wouldn't be any candy in the wrapper. And of course, then the kid would throw the big tantrum. And maybe that would happen a couple times in a row, or he'd vary it. Every other time there'd be a candy, and every other time there wouldn't be. And I guess after about 10 days to 2 weeks of that, they would both just laugh if there was no candy in the wrapper, and they would just work around the garden, roll in the flowers, and do those kinds of things.
But the sense of mentoring right up to the very end, the night before he left his body. Remember this? We gathered down. He had this little dooney inside his kutir, inside his room, and we all, as we all here, we lusted after his possessions. And there on his dooney, on a trishul on his dooney, was this whole gob full of malas. And Babaji was handing out these malas, you know. And I'm just panting after one of these malas. You know. Do you think he'd give me one? No way. No way. The last one goes and he's smiling at me.
I answered the phone one time at the ashram. I think this was the summer of '98. And there was a man calling from New Jersey. And he said he saw our shop catalog in the library. And he said he opened it up and he's telling me, I recognize the photo of the man inside. And I said, what do you mean you recognize him? And he said, he's the one who's been sitting at the foot of my bed every night for the past 4 nights. So Babaji is still doing this, and this gentleman is asking me, who is he? What does he want with some guy from New Jersey? I said, I don't know. Ask him the next time you He said, well, he's just smiling at me like he's gonna play some kind of joke on me. I said, yeah, that's Babaji.
Devi recounts in May of 1980.
Every gesture, every action is used by Babaji to teach us something through this drama we call life. He wants our minds to remain attentive in all circumstances, full of concentration, pure and alert, without any useless or superfluous thoughts. It's a new meditation focused in action. We are to learn to perform all of life's activities every day of our lives without any selfish desire, taking light into darkness, truth into ignorance, peace into conflict, and love into aggression.
Of course, he didn't speak much in the first years. It was only the last 4 years, when mostly many Westerners started to come, that he started to speak and kind of inspire us to live a life with God together and do service, to live in truth, simplicity and love, to repeat as much as possible the divine name, always try to find a connection with the divine name throughout day and night, and to do puja, bhajan, worship, to keep yourself centered and focused on the divine. Do karma yoga as service, any service, or your household duty. Because at the time I was pujari and always making a plate of prasad, not always halwa, but mostly fruits, cut up fruits. So many people in the hall, and then when we did aarti for the murti, I offered this first to the temple, and then when Babaji would come out during the darshan with all the people, I would have to bring this plate with fruits, offer it to Babaji, and then pass it out to everybody. But that particular day I was a little bit late and I was a little bit in a hurry feeling, so I was quickly cutting all this prasad and then putting it ready and doing aarti. And then when Baba came, I bring this prasad quietly to Baba, and he looked at me like he didn't accept to take any of this fruit. So So that was very embarrassing for me, like what to do with this picture. I have to give everybody, and only by walking back I realized the teaching of it, that anything that we do without attention, without peace and a loving mind, just to be with it, what we are doing, the divine doesn't like, he will not even touch it.
My experience with Baba often was that I would ask him a few questions, not so many, but sometimes when I would ask him questions about my life or what I should be doing, sometimes he would just look at me and smile and wouldn't say any words. And what I heard inside, though, which is often common experience with those of us around him, was that we would hear this internal answer within our hearts. And the answer often was, look into your heart. Go into your heart where that divinity lies, you know, and find those answers. Stand on your own 2 feet so that you're not always dependent on out here. So I think this, for me, was also part of the process, was that he came, he taught, he showed us, and then it was time for us to get going and do our work, and to hopefully also keep that energy alive and spreading throughout the world.
But one of the most wonderful experiences I feel for me about Babaji was somewhat what Ramaloti said, but was being able to be with him and have this communication go on between you and him that was not verbal. And I guess you could call it telepathy, but that kind of demeans it a little to me to say that. But it's like there could just be this exchange between the two of you of what you needed to discuss, work out, and then therefore wouldn't have to go on very long either. But that was just a wonderful way to be with someone.
In the last years he was always every day saying Furo and Hoshya, Savdan. Like, be alert, be awake. This is already such a great sadhana to just be like, you see Babaji is so much in the moment. Like our mind is so catching that we want to go with the mind and the desires what live in the mind. But Baba was so beyond that. He tried to help us that there is possibility. If you really focus your life on the divine, to be less troubled by the mind.
I'd like to tell a story about this Adesh, or the order that Babaji gives us to work in the world. And often in my pridefulness, I want to make sure that I do everything right. Some of you saw carrying Babaji's badukas back, I dropped them. And as I was reaching down to gather them up and kind of get things back together, I flashed on a memory that I had of another crash in Haidakhan. In the Babaji tradition, Babaji is a Shiva Mahavatar. So he's a manifestation and an incarnation of Lord Shiva. And one of Lord Shiva's sacred objects is his kamando, or his bath, his bathing bowl. It has a kind of a double-bottomed round with a handle on the top. And every day after Babaji's bath, he would have us carry the kamando back up to the temple full of water, so that he would offer water at the temple. And going up the stairs one afternoon with this sacred object in my hand, I tripped, fell, and broke the kamando, cracked it. And truth is, I don't have a clear memory about what happened afterwards, but I knew that I had done in this sacred object. The next memory I have is that we were using something else for the bathing. But time and time again, I would make mistakes at Haidakhan, kind of mistakes in assigned duties. But in all of that, and especially in this one instance of breaking the sacred object that Babaji had used literally ever since I could remember after being there, I got no heat for it. What I got the real heat for was what was happening in my heart. So if I had pulled back or was doing something of violence or disregard for others, that's when the hammer came down on me. But mistakes in the world as we try to do our duty wasn't paramount for him. You can break the kumbha, you can drop the padukas, but woe be to you who in your heart violated a trust against others, or bear harm, or bear a grudge against others. That kind of violation was so important to him, and he knew you. I mean, he was with you. There was no question about his knowing your heart and a sense of intimacy of your thoughts and your heart and your attitude. So, this year, right around the time of Baba's Mahasamadhi time, I had a dream, and I finally kind of got that Jesus and Babaji are the same. That it's the same divine teacher come to be with people, to help people connect with the divine. Finally, after 20 years, get that this Baba is truly a universal being, available in all traditions, and to all traditions, for us to experience this extraordinary joy.
It seems as if we are all here because Babaji has called us here. Whether we knew him in physical form or not, it really doesn't matter. We are here because we have been called here, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And people just had this inner feeling and this inner knowing, and they end up at the mountain. And it's a very similar experience with Babaji, and it's extremely palpable and it's extremely real. And acknowledging the fact that he is the master puppeteer, I would like to acknowledge the open-heartedness and the courage of those people here who never met Babaji or Babaji. I don't know if I could ever have done that. And I want to reiterate what Brahmoti said, that we may be already way ahead of the game. One day I was meditating outside Babaji's room, waiting to give him his bath. And he was saying a mantra, and he was working on the practice of trying to locate in the first place my heart. And it took a while. And once I found my heart, ultimately I found Babaji sitting in there. And it was a very visual experience, and I looked down, and there he was, sitting there looking back up at me, and smiling. And just when I was getting all tripped out about that, I heard a sound, and he was standing right in front of me. And he just looked down at me and he said, "Now your work is finished." Well, actually it's only just beginning. But for those of you who never met him, you still have experienced great good fortune in being here.
For most who arrived in Haidakhan, simply meeting Babaji was the experience of a lifetime. To some, he bestowed the full intensity of his love. You never knew the moment or the means whereby Baba would fill you with the experience of grace.
They came from everywhere. and from many cultures carrying all sorts of karmic baggage. High caste Indians, retired people, drug addicts, alcoholics, neurotic people, and crazies, and psychiatrists and psychologists. Baba treated them all with courtesy, love, patience, often granting the desires of those who asked from motives of love, faith, or devotion to God.
But every afternoon, Babaji would go over to the 9 temples and make pranams, pay his respects to all the different divinities within that were installed, the different mortis. And so I asked him, this was just about as I was leaving in 1981, I was already having such sadness in my heart about leaving. And Baba, I said, Baba, may I please come with you over to the Gufa side? It was also summertime, monsoon season, when the river is very tough, can be quite high, and really for me as a woman to cross the river, I needed some support, and Babaji would hold your hand and walk with you if you were allowed to go. So I had asked him, he said, yes, Ramloji, you may. And so when he was about to come, he let me know, and we walked down the 108 stairs, and we went to the river bottom. And then he stopped here and checked out some work that was going on in the river bottom by some karma yogis. And then he went over here and checked, and I'm just following him, very happy to be doing this with Babaji. And then he told me to sit on this rock, which was right near the river. And I sat there, and he went off to check some other workers. And I just thought I was sitting there until he finished. Well, it seemed like half a second, and there's Babaji on the other side of the river at the 9 temples without me. And here I'm sitting on the rock, and I'm a little confused, and then I go into great sadness, thinking that he forgot me. He doesn't really love me. I'm not very important. All the different processes that come up, bubble up in the heart, in the mind, or at least in my mind, when this little incident occurred. And so for some time I was sitting on the rock, and I started crying. I was very, very sad. I felt really left, stranded, dejected, not good enough. And I was crying on the rock, and as with many of the teachings of Baba, as I tried to sit there, I remembered, because actually he said, sit there and do Om Namah Shivaya, which is the mantra that he gave us very often. And so finally I got it in my head, if Babaji told you to sit here and do Om Namah Shivaya, why don't you do Om Namah Shivaya? And so I started sitting there, and I just sat there, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, saying it within my heart. And what transpired in a few minutes was very, very, very beautiful. I finally understood that Babaji, if he said to do this, it's what I should be doing. And so I sat there and did Om Namah Shivaya. And after some time, what occurred is I experienced Babaji's heart and light that was on the other side of the temple just expand very beautifully and enter into my heart. I felt like his heart went into my heart. And what I felt my heart do was just expand and expand in that love and that light. So much so that when I went to leave a few days later, there was some sadness, but I can tell you in my heart of hearts that I've never left Babaji again, and he's never left me again. So a very, very incredible experience.
And so we were in the youth hostel, and I'd go out and I'd meditate 2.5 hours at a time, and one thing and another. And I was doing japa all the time, doing japa and recitation of the mantra. And one night I had to get up to pee, and I realized that the mantra was doing me, and I wasn't doing the mantra. And I went, oh, what does mean? I didn't know what that meant. So. But I knew it was a powerful event, and the next morning I got up, and the mantra was still doing me, and it was just going really fast and fast and fast, and all of a sudden I just went, whoa, and I just went out. And I don't know if I got to bed on my own or you got me there.
No, he was on the floor. He was delirious, and every so often he would kind of come in and out, and every so often he would talk about flying, and he was with Baba, so. And he was sweating profusely the whole time. And I would just give him water and wash his face, and he was blitzed, the whole smiling. And the sweat just pouring, and he was just smiling.
So that started this little 3-day event of rerouting of life itself. And so anyway, what happened is, internally for me, is that Baba reached down and grabbed me by the hand and took me flying with him. And I went out among the celestial beings. I just spent 3 days over there doing that, just being among luminaries. And then when I came back, Chris and Lorraine had left me alone for a while, and I woke up. I had to pee, and I had to crawl to the bathroom. I couldn't get there any other way, and they came back and found me out of bed. So came and got me, and I just wanted to go back and start flying again. I really did not want to stay on this side of the veil, and Lorraine started pouring anti-plague formula in me and all kinds of stuff, so that I'd stick around, and I did. I had a crown chakra headache for maybe a year. My head just ached all the time, just at the crown. And as I came back into this country and everything else, I could only do the mantra. So for 8 years, I did japa and went through the motions of doing everything else and was present and accounted for the most part. But I couldn't not do the mantra. It was doing me.
I went to Haidakhan in 1983. I didn't know what I was really looking for, but Babaji gave me what I wanted and what I needed, in spite of myself. After about 2 weeks being at Haidakhan, one day Babaji said in the morning that everyone not living at the ashram had to leave tomorrow. Thinking that this was our last day at the ashram, my roommate, Herbert, decided he would go up to Babaji and ask him a few things that he had wanted to. Later that afternoon, he came back and shared with me that he had asked Babaji for Shaktipat. And Babaji slapped him on the back and slapped him on the chest, and Herbert went into a state of bliss. And that wasn't all. Herbert was told that he could expect more in a couple of months. Well, when Herbert told me this, I was green with envy. That was exactly what I wanted. I wanted some kind of experience of connection with God that I could feel. And that evening, things changed again. Baba said his trip was delayed. So we would be there another day, and we put in another day of work. Well, tomorrow came, and in the morning, Babaji pulled a little surprise. He said everybody could ask for one question of him. Well, it didn't take me long. I knew what question I needed to ask. So when it came my turn in the darshan line, I knelt in front of him and asked him, "Could you please help me to see God?" Babaji responded with no hesitation at all, "You see him right now." Well, that wasn't the exact answer that I was expecting. I felt kind of frustrated because I couldn't explain to him what I really wanted was that connection. That evening, we had Arti on the terrace, just at the top of the steps, the 108 steps. And we had it outside because it was warmer than usual and there was a nice evening breeze, so that was kind of cooling for us. Babaji was sitting there with 2 attendants on either side. And he was, as usual, he was scanning the skies. He seemed to be looking or receiving messages from afar. And as far as I could tell, it must have all been good news because he was just beaming. He was happy. It was like there was a spotlight on Babaji alone. All you could see was Babaji. as I was watching Babaji, eventually Arti began. We began singing the songs and people began drifting in. And somewhere in the middle of Arti, I became aware that my body had just expanded into the whole valley. Part of the feeling of my body was that it was filled with 1,000 sparkling points of light, and each point of light was like a point of pleasure. It was a total feeling of bliss. I was just immersed in it. That lasted until the end of Arti, and I was just in a state of my own. It didn't occur to me to ask whether anyone else experienced it. I think they did, but I didn't ask anybody. It seemed like everybody was just totally wrapped up in this mantle of bliss that Baba threw over everybody. I'm sure they all experienced exactly the same thing. So, in spite of my not being able to ask for what I wanted or otherwise obtain what I wanted, Baba gave it to me anyway. And I'm so thankful.
All of a sudden one night I had this dream and I hear, Hoshar, Savdan. And I'm driving with my parents in this big Lincoln, and we pull into a little, like, mini mart. You know, the mini marts where there's like a half a dozen stores and there's a tiny little parking lot that should be twice as big, but it's not. And we just kind of pulled in their caddy corner, and I look out, and here's Babaji walking down the sidewalk. Now, what is he doing in Stamford, Connecticut? I'm saying to her. So he's walking down, he's got the entourage, the whole deal. I get out of the car. No, the door of the car opens. I get out. And I go running at him, and I throw myself on the ground in a Southstone Pinon, and he just jumps right over me and kind of pats me on the way over, heads for the car. And my parents are in the car. And in the dream I'm saying, oh, this ought to be good. And so the first thing he does is he goes into the front seat, and my father was in the front seat, and he does something loving to my father. And then it was my mother's turn, and she was in the back. And the door opens. Babaji goes in there, and he grabs a hold of her, and he's hugging her and like this. Meanwhile, my mother, who is a rather, what shall we say, prim and proper British-Canadian woman, was sitting there trying to get out of this bus. Like, well, I never. Like this. And then all of a sudden, poof, the whole thing was gone. And in this dream, Babaji was wearing a turban. Well, my mother died, I don't know, 4 years ago, something like that. And before she died, it was 2 or 3 months before she died, she was starting to see things. And different, I think she was seeing her mother and so forth and so on. And then one day, lo and behold, she said, you know, last night there was this most beautiful dark-skinned man wearing a turban who came to the foot of the bed, and he said something to me, and I can't remember what he said, but all I know is I felt more loved than I had ever been in my entire life. It's big, really, really big.
It was just so incredible to be with him, things like that. Every time I have this picture on my dresser and I do a little arti in the morning, every time I look at him, what an incredible experience you've given us. Now what? love he poured out on us in so many different ways. I mean, sometimes it was tough love, but always you could see the love behind it. It just makes me realize how far off so many people are. Almost everybody. Just there's so much love that can be given, shared both ways, and we find it so difficult, and he found it. That's what he was love.
Babaji has promised to return in physical body whenever needed or called upon by ardent devotees. Vimlalal recalls Babaji's miraculous appearance to her on Dronagiri mountain in the early 1960s, well before his most recent manifestation. Babaji said that, as she had come with such great faith and devotion, he had to appear to her. Babaji responds to all who seek him with intense devotion and a sincere heart. Ramlati has shared that, even after 30 years, the feeling of Babaji's presence has strongly increased, and that it is an important time to come together as devotees to celebrate his presence and to share the stories and experiences that are happening right now. Sharing our miracles and our love helps all of us to remember the larger picture that we are all part of the dance of our manifested Lord Samba Sada Shiva. To learn more about Babaji's teaching and practice, contact Ramlati at the Babaji Ashram, located in the beautiful mountains of southern Colorado, near the town of Crestone. Haidakhandi Universal Ashram is a place for spiritual practice with a focus on surrendering yourself to divine energy. An attitude of respect and reverence for the culture connected with these spiritual practices can make a big difference in your personal experience. Life at the ashram begins early each day with the Aarti ceremony and continues with full days of spiritual practice. The daily routine is styled after the life that we led at Haidakhan Ashram in India, under Babaji's instructions. A major requirement of being at the ashram is to engage in conscientious daily work while repeating japa and remaining unattached to the results. Such karma yoga is one of Babaji's strongest teachings. Havans, or fire ceremonies, are also scheduled on a regular basis. Dried grains, fruits, and flowers are offered to the divine by way of the fire. Mantras are also repeated in thanksgiving for the many ways that we are sustained by the divine.
One morning just before I was going to leave to go back to Hawaii, I'd asked Babaji about doing the fire because I thought it'd be good in Hawaii when it was before the temple was built, actually. And he said, yes, we do the fire every morning. And then he reached into the fire and picked up fire in his hand. And because I was wondering, well, Babaji said, yes, you do, but I didn't get instructions on how to do it or anything. And he reached the fire up in his hand and took it in his hand, and it was just like a little fire in his hand. And then he just put it into my heart. He said, now the fire's in you. And it went right into my heart. And still in there.
Shiva, Shiva,